Hey guys, and welcome to this devlog for Rocket Explorer version 0.12, the Steam release. Finally! Before we begin, if you don't know what Rocket Explorer is, it's a rocket viewing experience. It's for desktop, Mac, Windows, Linux, and it's also for VR. Whether you have a VR headset or not, you can explore some rockets in some very cool ways. And if you want to know more, you can go to rocketexplorer.space and read more about it there and all the history and see where it started. It's been 12 versions since I've started, and most of the versions have taken about a month or two for me to get out, but this one took since January 2021 until now, which is the 2nd of August where I'm recording this. So it's taken quite a bit longer than some of the other versions, and we'll talk about some of the reasons for that in this video. So here's a quick rundown of some of the most important parts, or some of the parts that I've spent the most time on for this release in particular. The whole launching sequence, going to space, which also includes the new clouds and atmosphere changing into space. Staging the rockets, all the different boosters and different stages and fairings splitting apart. An improved launch pad and fixed service structure to go with it. A revamped look for the user interface, along with some new pages like settings and credits and sources. So some of the things that I just mentioned, I won't be talking about in depth. They're just new things that don't really need to be talked about more than what I just stated there. If you do want to know a little bit more, see a full list of changes and fixes and updates, there will be a page on rocketexplorer.space where you can see the release log for this particular release, where there's a whole list of things. I'm gonna spend the majority of the time talking about launching and staging, since that's what I've been spending the majority of the time developing. To start with, I'm actually going to send you back in time to January, where I recorded some bits of me starting to improve the launching system and figure out how I was going to get the rockets to orbit, and also talk a little bit about the staging and all that stuff. So have fun with past Casper. Hey, Casper from the past here. Today's the 31st of January and I'm going to work on getting rockets to space in Rocket Explorer. So I'll just start off by explaining what I want to try to do today, or at least start doing today. So here I drew the launch pad very simply with the tower there, and then the trajectory that the rocket takes right now. When it gets to this endpoint up here, it just stops and just keeps like burning statically. Essentially I want to stop the rocket here, and then I want to fade the screen to completely white, or at least what I can get away with, where you can't see anything. While you're in there, the whole sky changes to something more black or more space-ish. Basically that's what I'm gonna try to do today. Move the stopping point down here, and then add some clouds, fade the screen, and then maybe also move all the clouds like this way when you get out of the fading white screen, so it looks like you keep going and the clouds are moving like very fast. I'm in Unity now, and you can get a little bit of behind the scenes look. As you can see here, there are these lines which the rocket follows when it takes the different trajectories. So here you can see this marker here, this transform that I'm moving now. It shoots out a ray going through that blue line here and checks if anything gets in its way. And if it does, that means a rocket is probably launching, because that's the only thing that can really get up to here. So if anything intersects that check, it starts fading the screen. I put this trigger down here, which is very low, just to test it. So let's check it out. You can see the red line now shooting out here and past the launch trajectory here. And that's where, if the rocket hits that, it's gonna start the fade and start launching. So we launch, we have some beautiful smoke, and then let's see here, it hits the red line and it fades to white and fades to not white again. Alright, so it's been a couple of hours and I think I've got something that I would like to show you. Now I need to sort of take the clouds and move them away from the rocket at the same speed that it moved up. Okay, definitely some tweaking to do, but I mean, we're getting there. Check this out. This point here in the launch path is 4.5 kilometers downrange. So if I set it to say 5 kilometers, it'll be somewhere around here. And I think by that point, I can actually have faded the ground here. You can see it's very blue at this point, and I actually don't want it to be like this is a sort of fog effect. I want the ground to be clear. I want you to see it's earth. So by this point, I actually might have faded in an earth, the one you've seen me play around with earlier, some variation of that. Fade that in above here and remove the fog effect. Yeah, have that be the entire globe instead of just that thing. Or maybe I actually don't have to be in the entire globe. I just have it to make it the size of it, if that makes sense. Hi, Future Casper here again. So between these two cuts, I got this new cloud system, and it looked amazing, basically just right off the bat. So putting that in really helped a lot, and it also got me to realize that I need to drop that whole fading system that I've spent this time talking about, and really just do a whole Earth, and then fly the rocket all the way up to maybe like 200 kilometers up, and then have it be in space actually. Because the neat thing about this new cloud system is that it also controls the sky and the day-nighttime cycle. So what I could do is I can basically make it nighttime when it gets to orbit, or like on the way to orbit. So it slowly fades from blue to black. You know, there's still some improvements to do, but it was definitely an improvement over the whole fading while moving through the clouds thing that I had going on. The other thing that you might notice is that the ground looks a bit better. It's just because I spent a little bit of time doing a larger area of the ground and then doing higher quality textures. And also making sure the camera doesn't cut the ground off. So as you can see on the old launches, it sort of just cut the ground off as you moved away. I essentially just increased the camera's render distance, so it didn't just cut it off. It was a really simple fix, and it just looks much better now. So wasn't that hilarious? So as you can see, what I was talking about is sort of cheating, getting to orbit and faking it. Fake it till you make it. So once I got the new clouds in, because they also control the atmosphere and the sky, I saw the potential in actually being able to go all the way to orbit for real and not faking it like I was talking about there. And as you can see, I also thought I could sort of fake the size of the Earth, or maybe just make half of it. But what I've got now is actually the entire Earth. One of the reasons that I wanted to fake it to begin with was what's called floating point errors, and that happens in Unity. Well, I'll talk about it a little bit here. Another thing that I worked on is this floating origin point system. And this is something that I've talked about earlier, and it's because Unity doesn't like large numbers. So the really simple trick is to simply just move the whole scene when you hit a certain distance from the center point. So the rocket and the camera and everything related to that moves to the center point, and everything else moves away from it. And then when I travel another 5,000 meters, I do the whole thing again, etc. And then of course, if you move out of photo mode and back onto the launch pad with the first person view, it'll reset it, the whole thing, so it sort of gets back to zero from that point on. I hope that whole thing made sense. Games in Unity basically have to do this, so if you played Kerbal Space Program, it also does this. So now that I had a system that actually could fade you completely to orbit and it looked good, I needed to work on staging the rockets, because that's the thing they do in real life. And that's a thing that's unique for every single rocket. So one of the things that I ended up spending a good amount of time on that I haven't ended up using yet, I still might use it in the future because it's a great tool, was a rocket creator tool or rocket editor. So this might get a little bit nerdy, but hear me out. For Unity, where I'm making this, you can write your own little windows. So there are some standard windows like the inspector, where you can view some information about the object that you're currently looking at. There's a little browser window where you can see all the different files you have, but you can also make your own windows like this. So what I wanted to do was make a window where I could bring in a rocket, I could see all its data, and I could change it and add some new data and plug it in really easy and save it and have a new rocket or update a rocket. How you would normally do it is bring it into this inspector that I mentioned, and you have this long list of menus and you have to open a lot of things. It's really not well organized. So I spent a good bit of time working on this rocket creator tool. It is, however, the first time that I really spent time on doing something like this, so it was not something that I was familiar with. So I got maybe 90% of the way there, but the last 10% were just difficult as heck, and I knew that I was going to spend a lot of time on it, and I wanted to get this release done. So I just sucked it up and used the ugly ass inspector instead and got all the data in. So the reason I mention it in relation to staging is because that's one of the things where I had to put a lot of data in for each individual rocket. Because not only do they each stage at a different time, they also light their engines at a different time and do various things that are unique for every single rocket. So that's a lot of numbers to put in, and I wanted to do that in an easy way. But once I dropped that whole rocket creator and just went with putting it all in manually, I still had to figure out how I was going to do it, because you can do it in various different ways. Staging, that is. What I started out with was physics, because the real world is physics based. When you drop something, it drops. So I thought, that's what happens, that's what I'm gonna do. But that had its own problems, as you can see here. And it was so annoying because it was so close to actually looking good and working. And it still might if I spent some time on it. But what I ended up doing instead was animation. If I animate it well enough, it still might look like physics. So it still might look like it's all happening in a physics engine, and it's, you know, staging smoothly and everything is perfect. But with an animation like this, you can more easily control exactly how it looks, and it looks the same each time. No physics are gonna come and play and do all kinds of weird stuff. And I actually really like that. I like the control that I have in animation. And actually, fun fact, when I started with launching the rockets, it was done with animation. Now it's sort of done with a points-based system, because it was easier to do it with the massively large numbers that I have. Anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. So I did the staging with animation, and that's awesome and all because it looks great. But the one thing that physics had over animation is that I could just drop each stage automatically and didn't have to worry about it. For animation, I have to animate every single stage for each individual rocket manually. Ugh. So that took some time, and some of them are more unique than others. I mean, a lot of the stages that are just inline, just, you know, go down, fall away. But something like the Korolev cross for the Soyuz rockets, and also R7 and Vostok-K, and every other rocket in the R7 family, but that's more unique. So that's some of the things that I had to do. I had to look at YouTube videos of launches, make sure I got the animations right and such. So just know that when you launch a rocket, every single animation you see, I did that. Like everything else in the whole thing. And yeah, that's sort of where I ended up on launching and staging. When you finally get to orbit, it still just stops. Now it stops with the final stage. And that's where I would maybe like to have something with a satellite or a custom payload somewhere in the future, but we can talk about that later. So let's get into some of the future stuff that I want to work on. Some of the things you might have heard before that I've mentioned. It's because they are on my list and I haven't gotten to them. And some things are new, like some things that you guys have suggested, some stuff that I've been thinking about. And yeah, I think we should just get into it. Let's start with rockets and parts of rockets that don't get to orbit. So I'm talking about suborbital rockets and first stages that might come back to land. This is definitely one of the things that I want to work on for this next update. Suborbital rockets landing back again. what happens right now is they just sort of crash into the ground. I want them to have their proper landing, so this means opening a parachute for most of them, for the capsules, and landing softly. And the same thing goes for reusable first stages. So New Shepard is a good combination of the two, but also first stages of Falcon 9, of Super Heavy, for example. And I think I want them to land back close to the launch pad. You might have seen there's this big round pad, and I think that could be a decent place to land them. If I were to do it realistically, it would be a little bit down the coast, and then you'd have to sort of teleport there to see it. I might as well just do it right there where you are. And I'm thinking this should be fairly simple. I don't want to say it is. Now I did, because I spent a lot of time on the staging and such, so maybe it isn't simple, but I think I put in some good systems, so I can probably do it fairly quickly. Let's say relatively, because that could mean anything. Sort of tangentially related to that, I want rockets that have something to do with traveling horizontally to do their thing. That was very vague, but what I mean to say is the Space Shuttle and LauncherOne, for example, I want them to launch and land the proper way. So that means I want the Space Shuttle to come back and land at a runway, and I want the LauncherOne to launch from a runway, because it's hanging under the wing of an airplane. So you can see it take off and fly up into the air, and if you're in the photo mode, you can follow it and see it launch, etc. And yeah, I think that could be pretty cool. I think the takeoff of the plane would be fairly simple. It should just be activating the plane model and setting its trajectory to, instead of just going up like the rockets do now, just follow the runway for a bit and then fly up and do its thing. The more difficult part would probably be the space shuttle, as it's going up to orbit and then it's sitting there in orbit. Then how do I get it back to the runway? Especially if I do implement the next thing that I'm going to talk about. Keep that in mind, and let's talk about the next thing. And what that is rotating the Earth. So right now when it gets into orbit and it snaps in place, it just sort of sits there and the Earth is also stationary. And I could do it so the trajectory sort of continues and goes around the Earth, or I could make the Earth rotate slowly. I think the easiest thing would be making the Earth model rotate, but that also means that if I were to do the shuttle thing, it needs to sort of either warp to when it could come back for landing, or I need to do a sort of transition so it doesn't need to wait for the launch pad to come around. That could take quite a bit. So I'll have to think about that a little bit. Maybe you guys have some ideas, let me know in the comments. That might seem like a trivial thing with the Earth rotating, but going from moving and then the rocket basically stops and then the Earth needs to start rotating at the correct speed, so it seems seamless. Again, that's one of the things where I go into the cheating mode in my brain, where I want to cheat it instead of just having the rocket actually go around the Earth. I might end up doing that, but it seems easier right now to do the Earth rotating thing. And there are more things that I want to improve in regards to launching. I want some ice to build up before launch, and maybe some venting to start happening. I really want to improve the exhausts or the plumes from the rockets. So right now it's just a pretty simple particle system. I want it to look a lot better than it does right now. And not only that, I also want it to sort of expand as you go up into the atmosphere. Right now it does change from stage to stage, so some of the upper stages do have like expanded exhausts, but I want to have it happen like dynamically. And just another thing, I want to have the audio sort of change as you go into space. Right now it's just sort of the same audio all the way there, but I wanted to sort of have a low pass filter fade in, so it gets, removes all the high end and just gets this rumbly sound, sort of the classic you're in space sounds. I think that would be pretty cool, and it should be pretty easy as well. So a thing that's been suggested, which I think was pretty cool, was like launching some rockets simultaneously, sort of like a race to orbit, but just, you know, also a comparison of how the launch looks different from rocket to rocket. I think I'll think about that. I like the visual of rockets launching side by side. Let me know what you think about that idea and how you would like to see it implemented, if you would like to see it implemented. Some other ideas that I have talked about before is sort of a capsule viewer where you can just explore the capsules, an engine viewer, same thing but for engines, and perhaps even something with a payload, but that's a little bit more off topic from rockets as it's a payload, but it could still be talked about. And one thing I want to do is I want to overhaul the whole user interface. I don't think it's the most efficient right now. I think some of the things I would like you to be able to do simultaneously. So I think I can definitely improve the UI a bit. Right now you can only have sort of one menu open at a time. Maybe it would be cool to be able to change configurations of rockets while you're comparing them, or hiding certain parts of the rockets while you're comparing them or such. And that would, you know, require an overhaul of the whole UI system. But I have some ideas. Those are some of the major things that I want to work on, and then some small bits here and there. But if you do have some ideas for some really cool feature that you would like to see, sort of the basics we have now is comparison, launching, exploring the rocket, taking it apart and such. If you have any ideas of what else we could do, I would love to hear that down in the comments. So as you can see, there was lots done in this version, and there's still lots to do and implement in the future. And I think that rounds out this development vlog for Rocket Explorer version 0.12, the Steam release. It's so exciting that I finally get to get it out to all of you guys and see how you're gonna use it. Maybe you're gonna use it for videos. Maybe you're gonna just learn some stuff about some rockets, compare them, take some cool screenshots. Maybe you're gonna view your first rocket in virtual reality and see it launch there. That's how I got to view my first rocket. And I think it's a cool experience, and I hope you guys will enjoy it. And I hope you will stick around for future updates, as I think there's still so much cool stuff to do. So thank you guys so much for watching this devlog and being on this entire journey with me. And just a huge thank you to my supporters on Patreon. I wouldn't have been able to do any of this without them. I've only been able to spend significant amount of time like developing this because of you guys. So thank you so much. It really means a lot. And of course all you guys here on YouTube and on Twitter as well, just supporting me in what I do. I really appreciate it. So thank you guys so much. And again, if you need more info, go to rocketexplorer.space. You can also follow me on Twitter. I do tweet a lot about a lot of rocket stuff. And I think that's about it. So thank you guys so much, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye!